Good afternoon and welcome to the Full Scottish on Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Naina Bhardwaj. Our guest this week is MSP for Renfrewshire South, Tom Arthur. Welcome, Tom. So, a Survation poll has shown that the SNP has lost 12 seats at the next Holyrood election, supposedly. Do you think, in regards to this, that SNP need to present a bolder vision for Scotland?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me on the show. I would say that not only does the SNP present the best vision for Scotland, they're the only major party presenting any credible vision for Scotland. We see the Labour Party consumed by infighting, tearing themselves apart at Holyrood. The Tories are taking that to another level, where they are on the brink of civil war over Brexit. And so with that set of circumstances, the SNP is the only party that presents a credible vision for Scotland. And that is why the people of Scotland have returned the SNP to government on 3 occasions now. And as a further point I would make specifically about that opinion poll, one has to go and look at it in a broader context. And if we compare where the SNP stand today compared to the equivalent period in the last Parliament and the Parliament before that, the SNP are performing more strongly than they did then.
And recently there's been 30,000 teachers having a march in Glasgow to demand a 10% pay rise. John Swinney's offered 3% so far. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on this?
In my previous life before I was in politics, I was a tutor. I wasn't a classroom teacher, okay. But I have a huge amount of respect for the incredible work that all our teachers do. As a constituency MSP, I regularly meet with and have conversations with teachers in my constituency at all levels. And I can understand the frustrations. A consequence of decade almost of Tory austerity and the challenges that has put upon all public sector bodies with regards to paying conditions. But the Scottish Government is engaging constructively, as are COSLA and all the other bodies. I think the offer put forward by the Scottish Government, or put forward the Scottish Government supporting, is one that is credible, is serious, and while of course I respect the right of teachers and any other public sector worker to take to the streets and to demand, I think we have to also see this in the broader context of the limitations that are placed upon the Scottish budget. I think the reality is that we would want a circumstance where we could increase pay to the level demanded by many in the public sector, but clearly there are limitations upon what can be delivered in Scotland because we are subject to significant budgetary constraints from the UK Tory government. So I think the offer that's been put forward is a credible one, and I hope that conversations and dialogue will continue and that a sustainable agreement can be reached, one that respects the tremendous work that our teachers does, but one also which can be sustained and delivered within the tight fiscal settlement that the Scottish Government has to operate.
And John Swinney also announced that he was going to be doing an independent review into P1 assessments for Primary 1. And what are your thoughts on this? Are you for the assessments or against it?
I think it's very unfortunate that the question of standardised assessments has become so politicised, and I think we have seen a spectacular U-turn from the Conservatives in this, who originally supported the policy, and it really is just the worst kind of political opportunism, putting political point scoring ahead of the interests of our children. Now, I think what is important to remember in this set of circumstances that 29 local authorities have already been carrying out standardised assessments of this nature. This brings standardised assessments themselves bring an important resource towards teachers for measuring and evaluating the progress that a child is making. Now, we know that inequalities start at the very earliest age, and I think it's vitally important that teachers are equipped and empowered to identify those children who need additional support at that earlier age. And that is what these tests are designed to provide. Get important information so we know how to target resources and to reach what is a shared ambition, I would hope, for all politicians, which is to eradicate the attainment gap and to make sure that all children have an opportunity to fully succeed in life and that we eradicate these inequalities at the earliest stage. So the review is, I think, a very serious and considered response to the vote in Parliament. The Cabinet Secretary has shown a willingness to engage with all stakeholders and to discuss this matter with the seriousness that it merits, because I would hope that all politicians, as I said, are united in wanting children to have the strongest education possible, but that does mean being able to identify progress and identify those children who need additional support, and we can only do that through some means of assessment. So I hope that opposition politicians will engage in this in a considered manner, that they will drop the politics and start putting the interests of our children and young people first.
Right. And there's been accounts of children coming home crying, finding this too stressful. Is it not too young to start assessing children?
I think one of the aspects that's very important in this review that's been proposed is to look at it in the context of a play-based approach that the Curriculum for Excellence puts forward. So clearly, if there are issues in which the way the tests are being implemented and delivered, and the context and the contents of the tests which are creating experiences for children that are resulting in them being upset, then clearly that's something we would want to reflect upon. But there's a difference between looking to improve the tests and looking to abolish them whole scale with nothing to replace and nothing to substitute to achieve the aims that the tests are designed to achieve. So clearly these stories are important, but it's also a reality that for many politicians and many of my colleagues I speak with, the experience has not been of teachers and parents, coming to us to demand that these tests be abolished. So I think what we have to have is a reasonable response to this, and that's one which the Cabinet Secretary has outlined in responding to the vote in Parliament in his statement earlier this week. And as I said, I think it's incumbent upon all politicians to engage with this process seriously, drop the political point scoring, and put the welfare and the education of our children and young people first.
And this wasn't the only demonstration that took place. There was Glasgow Council women and workers who went on strike earlier this week over their 12-year-long equal pay dispute. So what are your sort of thoughts about this? This has been going on for a while now. What do you think of the strike? Do you think it's going to make any difference to reaching a settlement?
Well, firstly, I absolutely respect the right of all those who took part in that strike. They have been treated appallingly for a long time, and it has taken an SNP administration to be elected to Glasgow to begin the process of clearing up Labour's mess. Let's not forget it, Labour sat on this for a decade. We sought to use every tactic possible to obstruct and block justice for those women. So I think it's welcome that we're making that progress that we are now making, that conversations are taking place, and I salute the leadership and the commitment by Susan Aitken on this matter, and while I understand the frustrations of those who have been affected and treated appallingly, frankly, I think it's to be welcomed that we are now making progress, and I hope that all parties will work together constructively so that we can make sure that it is a just settlement and that we never allow this kind of inequality to occur again.
Right, now that these negotiations are going on and a settlement is in the process of being reached, what difference will this make, this protest and this strike?
I think it sends a message to all involved, and I think it is very encouraging in a sense that we have got to a stage now where people are taking to the streets on issues of equal pay, and this is part of a much broader agenda of creating true equality between men and women. What happened in Glasgow and in some other local authorities as well was absolutely appalling. It was sexist and discriminatory, and it has absolutely no place in modern Scotland. So I think it sends a message, not just to the public sector, but to the private sector as well, where we know there are challenges with the gender pay gap, that this is not going to be accepted anymore, and that people are not going to tolerate it. And I welcome the leadership shown by Glasgow City Council now in seeking to find a settlement, reflecting the leadership we have seen from the Scottish Government and the First Minister on working to eradicate inequality and the gender pay gap. And
you mentioned that there were some other Scottish councils going through similar instances. What are some examples of those?
I think it was there was issues, I think, in one of the Lanarkshire councils fairly recently as well. I'm aware that there are a lot of people considering and looking carefully at what's happening in Glasgow. Clearly at a UK-wide level, previously there was an example in Birmingham. So I think it's what is occurring in Glasgow does send out a message, and while it is, I can appreciate there's frustrations on both sides. There's frustrations for those who chose to strike, that there hasn't been a settlement reached yet, and there's frustrations that those who are trying to achieve a settlement from the City Council end have not been able to get to that point yet. I think there's goodwill on both sides to go and find that settlement that truly reflects the ambition for there to be a truly just and fair arrangements for pay within Glasgow.
Right. And in terms of universal credit and what is going on, do you think it's working for the poorest people in society?
Absolutely not. Universal credit is something which in theory sounds plausible, and some of the stated objectives of it I think many people would agree with, but the reality is far different. The implementation has been catastrophic, quite frankly. There have been huge overruns, complications and delays, but most importantly, we are finding that people are losing out. And this is having a catastrophic effect in people's lives. I've experienced it with my own constituents. I know every colleague I have will have had individuals coming along to have a surgery who have found, as a consequence of engaging with the UK welfare system, not just with universal credit, but right across the board, that their lives have been treated with, in a way which can frankly only be described as contempt. It's a world away from the ambitions we have set out for Scottish social security, that of a system that treats people with fairness, dignity and respect. So with universal credit, it is underfunded, it is poorly implemented, and it is pushing people into destitution. We know from a range of stakeholders, be it Citizens Advice Scotland, the Resolution Foundation, Trust, and the IFS, who have all presented studies showing the damaging impact that it is having, as I say, driving people into greater food bank use, leading people into debt, leading people into poverty. And we know from some of the work done by the likes of Child Poverty Action Group and others, a huge number of children that will be pushed into poverty over the coming years as a consequence of universal credit. So the UK government has to halt the rollout, and this has to be thoroughly reviewed. And the UK government also has to go and publish their own analysis of what is taking place within universal credit, because just to continue as is currently been going on is going to create a situation where even more people find themselves pushed into poverty, and that's completely unacceptable.
Right. And Michelle Ballantyne made some comments this week in regards to the two-child cap. What were your responses to this, and what impact do you think this is having on child poverty?
I have to say that I found the comments made by Michelle Ballantyne at first unbelievable, and then when I fully digested what she said, just absolutely shocking and appalling. And I made my views very clear in Parliament at the time, and have so subsequently. I do not think someone who holds these views, who believes that decisions about starting a family should be taken with an abacus, is really the kind of person who should be holding an opposition welfare spokesperson role. Ultimately, that is the person that the Scottish Conservatives at Ruth Davidson and Jackson Carlow think should be leading the social security system in Scotland. Someone who thinks that if you're poor, or even if you're falling hard times, then you're less worthy. You're not as entitled to having more than 2 children as someone who is more affluent. What a disgusting Dickensian view that has absolutely no place in modern Scotland. So I made my views clear at the time. I think she should do the decent thing and resign, and if she doesn't, she should be removed by Ruth Davidson or Jackson Carlow.
Okay. And do you think this is having a massive impact on child poverty, to child cap? What difference is this making? Ian Duncan Smith intended perhaps to force people into lowest paid work and sort of keep them there. Do you agree with that?
If we think about the two-child cap, there is of course the iniquitous rape clause. My colleague Alison Phillips has campaigned strongly in that for a number of years and was, I think, one of the very first, if not the first, MP to really shine a light on this and bring it to national attention. But the reality is that we're heading very soon towards a stage where it will apply to all children regardless of when they were born. So if someone is a new claimant for universal credit, and that they will not be entitled to support for a third or fourth child. Now the reality is that people can be in life very successful. They can be in secure work, they can own their own home, have 2 cars, can go holidays, have a very comfortable life, and then catastrophe can strike, illness, redundancy. I was contacted by someone who worked at Northern Rock and her husband worked at Northern Rock, and they were both made redundant at the same time and consequently needed tax credits. We now have a situation where 3rd and 4th children would not be entitled to that additional support. And so the reality is it's a UK government backed by their Tory colleagues that want to balance austerity on the backs of children. I just think that's an absolutely appalling approach, and it will inevitably drive more children into poverty. And we know what the consequences of that will be. Children will be more exposed to adverse childhood experiences, greater likelihood of developing physical and mental health conditions, more challenges in employability, lower educational attainment, all of these various negative factors that attend childhood experience of poverty. That is a consequence of these reforms. And even within the wicked bean counter logic of the Tory government, where everything is about pounds, shillings and pence, the reality is, by driving children and family into poverties, it will create a situation when these children become adults that they are perhaps going to be more likely to require the support of the state, be that through social security, through health and social care services. So it really is, when it comes to universal credit, it is an ideal and the 2-child cap, and the benefit freeze and the benefit caps and the whole austerity agenda. It is something ideologically driven by the Tories and their frankly Victorian Dickensian values.
And in regards to this whole agenda of austerity, do you think we need a complete reform of the benefit system to make a difference?
I think for a start, the rollout of social security, rollout of universal credit has to be paused. I think the best reform for social security is for complete devolution of social security to the Scottish Parliament. Currently, we will only have by the end of this Parliament powers over about 15% of social security spend in Scotland. And while that's welcome and we have the 11 powers now coming to the Scottish Parliament, there's still a huge area where we don't. So the biggest reform, the best reform, would be for social security to be in the powers to be in the hands of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. But in the interim, and before we achieve that, the UK Government has to halt the rollout of universal credit. It has to do away with the 2-child cap and the iniquitous rape clause, and it has to start remove the benefits cap, remove the freeze, and start putting substantial money into the system so that people are fully and properly supported.
And what are your thoughts on the sort of sanctions regime that's been going on?
I think it's a absolutely brutal and degrading a way to approach people. I've had constituents in my surgeries in tears, feeling on the verge of a breakdown is how one described it to me, because of their experience of sanctions and their experience of capability assessment tests. That is fundamentally in society, how we treat those who fall in hard times and those who are most vulnerable. How we treat these people really defines who we are as people. It says something about our values. And if the fact that the UK government are content to implement these policies, supported by their Tory cheerleaders in Holyrood, speaks to their values and speaks towards their attitude. And I find it difficult to comprehend why any politician would want to pursue these policies. And I just look forward to the day when we're no longer subject to these policies being inflicted on us in Scotland by a government that we did not elect, and we have the full powers over social security and our own Scottish Parliament.
Right. And what do you think the budget's going to be for Scotland, and should Holyrood be faced with sort of mitigating the worst of what Westminster controls in terms of the Scottish economy?
when I spoke in Parliament this week, I made very clear I don't want to be the Parliament that mitigates, but a lot of what we're having to do is mitigate £100 million a year on a range of areas, whether that be on the bedroom tax or council tax reduction, or a number of other areas. We've had a lot of commitments over the latter. I say commitments, a lot of announcements from the UK government over the last month that we're going to see the end of austerity, and also we're going to see a substantial increase in health spending, and that these Parliament consequences will be passed on to the Scottish Government in full. Often what the UK Government would like to do is it would like to announce increased health spending, but as they increase one budget will take away with another, and you can end up with the net result either not being what it was stated or actually a reduction. So what I want to see in the budget is a genuine end to austerity, not just hollow rhetoric. And I want to see that as an opportunity to start substantially investing in the people of this country. Because fundamentally austerity is a flawed ideology, and it is a failed project. It has led to a situation where, in terms of economic growth and in terms of productivity, the UK as a whole is lagging behind other European countries who chose to go and invest in their people and took a different approach to what the UK government has done. So let's see a genuine end to austerity tomorrow. Let's see universal credit halted. Let's see substantial investment put back into our social security system across the UK. And let's see the Scottish budget not only protected but increased, and all of these promised health consequentials passed on in full.
And now a UK Department of Trade public consultation closes this week, or has closed this week. So who knew about this? We've not seen anything in the media. What's been going on? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is all part of a process that the UK government is undertaking to prepare us for what they would describe as global Britain. And what we're seeing is that Britain might want to think of itself as being global, but the rest of the globe is saying something quite different. The whole Brexit process, and we're now, tomorrow, I think we're 5 months away from Brexit Day, we are edging closer and closer and closer to a no deal. We are in the situation where the UK government is now making contingencies to turn motorways into lorry parks, where they are going to have to put together fleets of ships to ensure that food can be brought into the UK. We'll have to talk about stockpiling medicine. And there was even warns about having to look at civil contingencies in terms of internal security. It's a constant potential civil unrest. This is the United Kingdom in 2018. It is an absolutely absurd situation we're getting into. And I think a lot of what the UK government is doing in regards to speaking about future trade relationships and future trade deals, they are in a state of delusion. It is a fantasy world they're occupying now, which is completely detached from reality, and it has characterised an entire approach to the Brexit negotiations. The European Union has been clear time and time and time again that there are a limited number of options available to the UK. Single market, customs union membership, a more detached relationship such as what Canada has, or effectively no deal. The UK government is still attempting to go and cherry pick, and it still believes that at some point, because it's the UK government, the EU will have to capitulate and give way. We are now several weeks after when we had been promised a final agreement, not only on withdrawal, but a substantial statement of what the future trading relationship with Europe would be. Neither have materialised, and we're not going to get that substantial declaration now on a future relationship until after we are into the transition period, which means that the best case scenario from the UK government perspective is to get a blind Brexit, when the UK will be having to negotiate with the body of the EU, of which is no longer a member. And the EU as a body is the world's biggest integrated single market. It can stand as an equal to the United States and to China in a way that the United Kingdom simply could not do. And that's what awaits the United Kingdom. So what the UK government should do is they should do as the First Minister has called for very clearly. They should scrap these ridiculous plans from Chequers, which are not going to fly, and they should commit to single market membership and customs union membership. Now, I want the UK, I want Scotland to remain within the European Union, but if that's not possible, we've shown a willingness to compromise. Okay, we leave the European Union, but we stay in the single market and the customs union. It mitigates the worst effects while respecting that UK-wide vote to leave the European Union. And I think Parliament in Westminster is now going to face a choice very, very soon. The UK government is presenting a false choice between a bad Brexit and no deal. That is not something we have to allow we cannot allow that to define our decision-making process. Perhaps the only choice, the only sensible choice, the only choice that answers all of the questions posed by the border in the island of Ireland and the questions about economic dislocation and damage, the only solution is single market and customs union membership. And it's about time the UK government admitted that.
Right. And the WTO has rejected the UK's application as well to join on the same terms as the EU. What do you think about that? Do you think that's another option?
I think we're seeing a pattern emerging now.
Right.
We have seen Tory ministers triumphantly say that Brexit negotiations are going to be a piece of cake. It will be the easiest negotiations we've ever conducted. We're deploying similar rhetoric now with regards to WTO extension. We are deploying similar rhetoric with regards to trade deals, be it with the United States or Australia, or Canada or any other country. And I think what is people have to remember, particularly those who voted leave and believe that that is a better option for the UK's trading relationships, is the lies that the Leave campaign perpetuated during the campaign and the lies that the UK government have indulged in since then, where there have been statements from UK government ministers that this was going to be straightforward, and it has been anything but. Michael Gove said that the public are tired of experts. What we need now are experts, and when we listen to expert advice, people who are experienced within these types of negotiations, they are absolutely categorical and clear that this is going to be an incredibly difficult and demanding process for the UK, because all of those other countries with which the UK currently trades, as a consequence of being a member of the European Union, these countries will want to extract the most favourable terms possible from the United Kingdom. And the reality is that we face global challenges. We are moving there's a real challenge to the liberal world order, as it's been termed. And countries, be it the United States or others, are looking at taking a far more nationalistic and transactional approach, and less at cooperation and more about what's in it for them. So out of the European Union, the United Kingdom going into negotiations against the United States are going to find that Donald Trump will want to drive a very hard bargain. He is a man who believes there's only winners and losers. Every deal is a zero-sum game, and he's not going to be the sucker in his eyes. And so that's why we now face the real danger of hormone-fueled beef, chlorinated chicken, and demands from the UK to open up the NHS demands from the US rather to open up the NHS to private competition. These are real threats that now exist, and the UK, as an independent trading state, as they would like to describe themselves, is not going to be able to parley as an equal with these countries. And if the UK wants a trade deal, these are the things at home that are now under threat. So this is with Brexit. This is not even the end or the beginning of the end, but it's not even the end of the beginning. And if we're in a situation where if the UK government pursues its current course, not only is it at risk of crashing out of the European Union, but it is at risk of seeing its entire standing in the world, which has already been degraded catastrophically, and relegating the UK to a position of weakness that it has not been in many, many centuries in its existence.
And speaking of Trump's America, so there was the synagogue walk-in in Pittsburgh where 11 people were murdered when they were praying. There was the racist who shot 2 elderly black people in Kentucky. And there was all the pipe bombs that were sent to Democrats. What do you think is going on? What is your response to all of this?
I actually tweeted about this last night. The events in Pittsburgh are horrendous, and my heart goes out to all those who have been affected. But in all of the coverage that I read, there was one word that I didn't see, and that was terrorism. And I think that if it had been someone from the Middle East running in to a synagogue, that's exactly what we would have seen in a lot of coverage. And the reality is that far-right terrorism is now a reality. It's a threat. It's existed in the United States for many years. We're 2.5 decades on almost from Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma bombing. But it is a reality. It is present, and we've seen it with the explosive devices being sent to prominent liberal political figures in the United States. And this, we've seen a process where over recent years, and particularly since Trump became president, where a lot of language that was once regarded as beyond the pale is now being legitimised and becoming acceptable. There was an expression I read recently which I thought captured it quite well: idea laundering, rather like money laundering, but taking ideas that would just never have been acceptable in decent conversation and in civil society, and now starting to legitimise them by giving platforms to extremists, by allowing serious consideration and serious discussion of views which really had once been relegated to the darkest fringes of the internet. So there's a real challenge in how we respond to this, and for me personally, that's about calling it what it is. If people are prepared to go and use violence to push forward their wicked and malice ideologies, then we have to name that for what it is. We can't sit and use various euphemisms and try and sanitise it and present it as lone wolves or as Donald Trump put it, as a maniac. We have to start describing these people for what they are, which is, in my view, domestic terrorists.
And whilst this is all going on in America, do you think it does influence the rhetoric of Britain as well and of Scotland? What do you think?
Absolutely. My colleagues in the Scottish Parliament, Hamza Yousaf and Anis Sarwar, have both spoken publicly and very passionately and very committedly about the horrendous abuse that they have been subject to with regards to racism and intolerance. My colleague James Donnan has spoken about sectarianism and the challenges that apply there, and the horrendous abuse that he and others have been subject to. So intolerance and abuse is becoming far too common in a lot of our rhetoric, and particularly it's been facilitated to an extent by social media. I find that Twitter, for example, provides a fantastic forum for following news, for engaging with constituents and engaging with other people involved in politics and journalism. But it has also provided a platform for people, often cloaked in a mask of anonymity, to hurl the most abhorrent abuse at politicians. And it also creates as well an echo chamber where people's own particular, extreme views can be fed back to them, and consequently we are not exposed to other views, we're not challenging their views. And it moves us to a situation where politics becomes incredibly tribal and polarised, where people are unwilling to speak to each other. And a very dangerous thing that occurs is when it's when public debate and discourse starts to lose a common understanding of what truth is, what impartiality is, what facts are. And Donald Trump is someone who's been at the forefront of that, and the Leave campaign in the UK was very much involved in that, peddling just outright lies, denying the value and contribution that experts have to make. And when we move into that particular situation and scenario, we find ourselves in a very dangerous place because when members of the public perhaps start to lose trust and confidence in what politicians are saying and what experts are saying, and only want to listen to views that reinforce their own particular point of view or prejudices, then it becomes very difficult to have the rational conversations that we need to change people's minds. And that is something that has, I think, been imported to an extent from US politics into UK politics. I don't think we're in Scotland, we're in the same situation, but I think particularly when we see what's a position that, for example, the UK Conservatives find themselves in, where very senior figures make statements such as no deal is better than a bad deal for many years. A ludicrous statement bears no relationship with reality. When the Prime Minister can say things like that, that's indicative of a direction of travel where we're not just talking about spin or exaggeration, or trying to put a positive light on a particular view, but just talking about downright lies, and that's incredibly dangerous.
Right, so it's certainly been an eventful week this week. What has your highlight been so far in terms of the work that you've been doing?
Actually, on Wednesday morning, I convened the last meeting of something called the Pow of Inchaffrey Drainage Commission Scotland Bill. Now, when I start speaking about this to my colleagues, I can see their eyes roll as if I'm about to go and get another long lecture, but very briefly, the Scottish Parliament has a mechanism for something called private bills, and they're unique. We also have member bills, which are confusingly similar to private member bills at Westminster. These are legislation and bills proposed by individual members, not the government. But private bills are bills put forward by outside bodies outside Parliament. And this was a particular private bill which was to do with the regulation of a commission which looked after and maintained a series of drainage ditches in Perthshire. A very dry subject, but there was a very interesting piece that was written on the BBC website on that morning, bringing it to the attention of some people. And what it was essentially saying is that the work of the committee, while not particularly exciting or well known, actually showed Parliament at its best, because over the course of 18 months the committee has worked to take this legislation and to substantially improve it, to put in safeguards, to clarify points, and to enhance the rights of the people who are impacted by it. And that, for me, in a sense, was actually incredibly satisfying, because ultimately a lot of the positive work that goes on in politics, as in any areas, doesn't get covered. Naturally, people want to look for sensation and scandal. This was a substantive piece of work that will make a difference to the lives of the people who are impacted by it. So in a sense, I was very proud to be part of that. It was certainly not something I ever expected to be involved in when I got elected. And it was interesting because that's how I started my Wednesday. And later in the day, my Wednesday ended very differently in terms of reaction after speaking in the debate and calling out Michelle Ballantyne's comments. So it was a full spectrum of political experiences that particular day for me. So I think I'd say Wednesday overall, for many reasons, was the highlight of my week personally.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us today in the studio. We do appreciate your time. This week has also seen the launch of our crowdfunder. Broadcasting Scotland can only exist with the backing of our supporters, of course. And thank you to those who have donated so far. Please do follow the link below to our crowdfunder page and give as generously as you can. Every penny that we've ever received for making programmes has been put to good use, and we guarantee it will be contributing towards that in the future as well. That's it for this week. Thank you to Tom, and thank you to you for watching. For more information about Broadcasting Scotland and our programmes, you can visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot. While you're there, you can also subscribe for £5 a month, which will allow us to keep making our programmes. Look out for Scotland at 7 throughout the week on Broadcasting Scotland, and the Full Scottish will be back again next Sunday at noon. Thank you, and see you next week.